Hello everyone, you can call me RBB. Today we are going to take a look at the tragic story of Tariq Monteiro and Alex together. But before we move forward, if you've ever had a horrible incident in your life, you can share it with us using the email in the description box. Your story might soon be featured on our growing channel. When the sun rose over London on August 12, 2019, no one could have guessed that by nightfall, a young life would be extinguished and a chain of events would ripple through 2 continents. This is the story of Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro, known in the drill rap scene as Seuss, and the murder of Alex Smith, a crime that would shatter families, ignite international headlines, and serve as a brutal reminder of the cost of gang violence. But to understand how it all began, we must go back, long before the blood was spilled, long before the arrests, long before the trial. We must start with 2 boys, growing up in very different versions of the same city. Alex Smith was just 16 years old, a boy with dreams bigger than the world he was born into. Friends remembered him as gentle, kind-hearted, and full of potential. A promising youth footballer from Southampton, he spent his early years on the field, his feet dancing across muddy pitches, his eyes always on the ball and the future. Alex wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a troublemaker. He was just a teenager trying to carve out a better life in a world that didn't always offer second chances. He loved music, family, and football. He had no idea he was walking into a war he never signed up for. Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro, known to the streets and to fans as Seuss, had a different story. Born and raised in London, Monteiro became part of the burgeoning drill music scene, a genre that captured the raw, unfiltered reality of street life. His lyrics were gritty, violent, often glorifying the very life he was entangled in. The line between persona and reality blurred fast. Tariq was affiliated with the Agar Grove gang, based out of Camden. Their rivals, the Combo gang, controlled neighboring territories. To outsiders, it was easy to dismiss it as typical gang nonsense. But for those on the ground, the rivalry was deadly serious. The streets of London, ancient and majestic, also hid darker currents that pulled young men like Monteiro into a vortex of violence, loyalty, and bloodshed. Summer 2019 was a dangerous time in London. Gang violence was on the rise, and the feud between Agar Grove and Combo gangs intensified. Tit-for-tat attacks became the new normal. Stabbings, beatings, shootings. Each act of violence was answered with another. Each insult demanded blood. Alex Smith had friends with ties to Combo, though he himself wasn't considered deeply involved. But in gang wars, guilt by association was often enough to paint a target on your back. And for Tariq Monteiro and his associates, Alex Smith was the target. The day of the murder, August 12, 2019. It was a warm evening when Alex Smith found himself near Munster Square, not far from Euston Station. At 11:10 p.m., witnesses saw 2 stolen vehicles, a Seat Leon and a Mini Cooper, speeding through the area. Inside were members of the Agar Grove gang, including Tariq Monteiro and Syed Muhammad. They had come hunting. Alex, unaware of the looming danger, was suddenly set upon. He tried to flee, but there was no escape. Monteiro and his crew gave chase, armed and merciless. Alex was cornered. In a brutal, frenzied attack, he was stabbed twice in the chest. His injuries were catastrophic. By the time emergency services arrived, Alex was already gone. 16 years old, his dreams, his potential, his entire future, wiped away in seconds. The murder of Alex Smith sent shockwaves through the city. He wasn't a gangster, the media reported. He wasn't a hardened criminal. He was a teenager. Another young life lost to senseless violence. Vigils were held. Friends wept. His family was devastated. The football community mourned one of their own. But grief wasn't the only force moving through the streets. Detectives were mobilizing, and their sights were set on Tariq Monteiro. Scotland Yard's homicide detectives launched a full-scale investigation. CCTV footage showed the stolen cars in the vicinity. Forensics teams swept Munster Square for evidence. Witnesses described the chaotic scene. Young men piling out of vehicles, armed and aggressive. As detectives pieced together the crime, a clearer picture emerged. Tariq Monteiro and Syed Muhammad were prime suspects. But by the time police moved in to make arrests, Monteiro and Mohammed had vanished. They had fled London and the United Kingdom entirely. It wasn't just an impulsive decision. Tariq Monteiro and Syed Mohammed had planned their escape carefully. They knew the streets were too hot. They knew the police would come knocking. So they slipped away, flying out of the country under false pretenses. Their destination: Nairobi, Kenya. It wasn't random. London gangs had ties that stretched across continents, and Kenya offered a place to lay low, far from the reach of British law enforcement. Or so they thought. In Nairobi's Kilimani area, Monteiro and Mohammed lived under assumed identities. Monteiro even obtained a Somali ID card under the name Abdullahi Abshir Mohammed. But even oceans away, justice was closing in. While Monteiro and Mohammed lived in hiding in Nairobi, back in London, detectives were relentless. Through painstaking investigation, UK authorities worked with Kenyan counterparts. Monteiro's fake documents were eventually uncovered. Intelligence sharing between the Metropolitan Police and Kenya's Directorate of Criminal Investigations led to a breakthrough. In January 2022, a coordinated operation in Kilimani, a wealthy suburb in Nairobi, was executed. Police raided a safe house, and there, they found them: Tariq Monteiro and Syed Mohammed. Monteiro tried to maintain his false identity, clutching his Somali ID card. But it was over. He was arrested, not just for being a fugitive, but for the brutal murder of Alex Smith. In the apartment, investigators found a dagger, a chilling reminder that violence was never far from Monteiro, no matter where he went. The two young men, who once believed they had outsmarted justice, were now prisoners in a foreign land, awaiting extradition. Extradition wasn't immediate. British authorities worked quickly to ensure the legal process was honored. After months of diplomatic coordination and legal hurdles, Kenya approved the extradition request. On February 1, 2022, Tariq Monteiro and Syed Mohammed were placed on a flight bound for London. When they touched down, they were escorted by Metropolitan Police officers directly to custody. There were no grand scenes, no statements. Just two men facing the crushing weight of consequences. After 2.5 years on the run, Monteiro was back. But this time, there would be no escape. The prosecution built an airtight case. They had CCTV footage showing the stolen vehicles Monteiro and Mohammed used on the night of the murder. They had witness testimony describing the ambush. They had forensic evidence linking the men to the crime scene. Moreover, investigators had cracked open Monteiro's digital footprint, drill rap lyrics and social media posts that, while not direct confessions, revealed a pattern of behavior steeped in gang rivalry and violence. But the crown jewel of the case? The clear evidence that Monteiro and Mohammed had fled the country immediately after Alex Smith's death, a flight that spoke volumes to their guilt. As the trial date approached, London braced itself for one of the most high-profile gang-related murder cases in recent memory. In May 2023, the trial of Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro and Syed Mohammed commenced at the Old Bailey, one of the most famous criminal courts in the world. Inside the courtroom, Alex Smith's family sat solemnly, hoping for justice. Monteiro and Mohammed pleaded not guilty. Their defense teams argued there was no definitive proof they had personally stabbed Alex Smith. They suggested the chaotic nature of the attack meant others could have been responsible. But the prosecution dismantled these arguments one by one. They presented overwhelming evidence: Monteiro and Mohammed's presence at the crime scene, their escape from the UK immediately after the murder, the planning and coordination involved in the attack, the recovered weapons, their affiliations with violent gangs. The jury listened intently, day after day, as the details of the crime were laid bare. Outside the courtroom, the public followed every development. For many, it symbolized the grim intersection of youth culture, drill music, and gang warfare. Inside the courtroom, Alex Smith's family clung to hope that their son's killers would finally be held accountable. After weeks of harrowing testimony and impassioned arguments, the jury retired to deliberate. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent. Guilty. Both Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro and Syed Mohammed were found guilty of the murder of Alex Smith. The words hit like a thunderclap. Alex's family wept quietly, not with joy, but with the bitter, complex relief that justice, at least in part, had been served. Monteiro remained stoic as the verdict was read, but the reality was unavoidable. He was facing life behind bars. In June 2023, the men returned to court to receive their sentences. The judge did not hold back. He described the murder of Alex Smith as senseless, brutal, and motivated by the toxic culture of gang rivalry. He condemned Monteiro and Muhammad for their roles in orchestrating a targeted planned attack on a young boy who barely had a chance at life. Monteiro was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 24 years before he would even be eligible for parole. Muhammad received a life sentence as well, with a minimum term of 23 years. For Alex's family, no sentence could bring their son back. But there was a measure of peace in knowing his killers would not walk free anytime soon. Monteiro and Muhammad weren't the only ones implicated in Alex Smith's murder. Earlier, two other gang affiliates, Yusuf and Arif Bayomi, had already been convicted. Yusuf was sentenced to life with a minimum of 18 years. Bayomi received life with a minimum of 21 years. The prosecutors made it clear, the murder of Alex Smith wasn't the result of a spontaneous street fight. It was an organized, deliberate attack carried out by multiple individuals, united by gang loyalty and a reckless disregard for human life. The court sent a strong message. There would be no leniency for those who turned the streets into battlefields. In the aftermath of the trial, the focus turned back to where it belonged, Alex Smith. Friends and family shared memories of a vibrant, loving young man, a boy who dreamed of playing professional football, of seeing the world, of building a future. His coaches remembered his dedication. His teachers remembered his kindness. His friends remembered his laughter. In many ways, Alex became a symbol, a stark reminder that behind every statistic, every headline, every news report, is a real human being with dreams, with family, with a future stolen. He was not a gangster. He was not a criminal. He was just a boy caught in the crossfire of a world he never chose. The case of Tariq Monteiro reignited debates about drill music and gang culture in the UK. Drill music, characterized by its raw, often violent lyrics, had come under fire for glorifying gang lifestyles. Critics argued that it fueled street violence, providing soundtracks to real-world bloodshed. Supporters countered that drill music was a form of expression, a way for marginalized youth to tell their truths about the environments they were forced to survive in. But the reality was undeniable. Monteiro lived the life he rapped about. And it ended in tragedy, for Alex Smith, for himself, and for countless families impacted by the violence. Policymakers called for tougher crackdowns on gang activity. Community leaders called for investment in youth programs and alternatives to gang life. But change, everyone knew, would not come easily. In the end, justice was served, but at a devastating cost. 4 young men lost their futures to the prison system. 1 young boy lost his life. Families were left shattered, communities scarred. Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro, once poised to make a name for himself in music, would now spend the prime years of his life behind cold prison walls, his name forever tied not to fame, but to murder. Alex Smith's legacy, however, lived on, in the memories of those who loved him, and in the hope that his story might one day help prevent others from meeting the same fate. As the streets of London moved on and new headlines emerged, the echoes of Alex Smith's murder remained. For every life lost, every life wasted, the question lingers. When will it end? The story of Tariq Monteiro and Alex Smith is not just about crime. It's about choices. It's about the lives we save, and the lives we lose, when young people are abandoned to violence, to despair, to dreams that die too soon. This was the rise and fall of Tariq Kenedy Mangal Monteiro. This was the tragic, senseless murder of Alex Smith. And this, above all, is the real human cost of gang violence. For more chilling true stories like this, kindly hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our stories. Stay safe always.